everyone, and welcome back to The Basics, a series where we have honest conversations about mental health. I'll be your host today. My name is Kayla. I've been here with TWLOHA on and off since about 2018, and I'm currently the social media and communications manager. And we do have a guest joining us today, not just a guest to the channel, but a guest to TWLOHA. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jana. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm the Community Partnerships Director at Crisis Text Line, which is a nonprofit that provides free 24/7 mental health and crisis support via text all across the country. And you may have seen our number around 741-741, but we're also available on WhatsApp and web chat. I've been with Crisis Text Line for 5 years, and prior to that, my background was really in journalism, and I'm currently getting my MBA. I live in Brooklyn with my 2 cats and my dog, and a really fun fact about me is that in undergrad, I was a college radio DJ, so this is kind of a little bit of a throwback for me.
Love it. Well, thanks for joining the live recording world again with us. For anyone who's watching and is like, I've never heard of Crisis Text Line before, that is totally foreign to me, what is like your quick summary? What is Crisis Text Line and how does it work?
Yeah, so we provide free 24/7 crisis support. It's all via text. And for mental health, honestly, we say that if it's a crisis to you, it's a crisis to us. So it could be anything from I'm having a really bad day at school, I have finals tomorrow that I'm nervous about, I'm going through a divorce, I'm just stressed out because there's a lot of things going on in the world and it's hard to do daily life with what's going on. All the way up to people who are thinking about suicide, experiencing domestic violence or other kinds of violence, and other more imminent type issues like that. So what you can expect is if you text into 741-741, you're going to start by getting a few automated messages back. So these are some of the only automated messages you'll get throughout the conversation. It's basically going to let you know our terms of service. It's going to tell you how to switch to Spanish if you want, if that's what you prefer to have this conversation in. It's going to share some links to resources, and then it's going to ask you, what's your crisis? That next message where you tell us a little bit more about what's going on is run through a machine learning algorithm that we've built that helps us triage our texter queue. So it's learn the words that people are using when they're potentially at imminent risk. And if you're using one of those words, we're going to put you right to the top of our line if there is one, so we can reach you the fastest. So if you could think about it, it's kind of like a hospital emergency room where somebody with a broken ankle is going to go over a sprained ankle. So after you tell us what's going on, we're going to connect you with one of our volunteer crisis counselors. These are people who are located all across the country. They've gone through our 30-hour online training and a background check. And the training really covers things like active listening, empathy, collaborative problem solving, and risk assessment, things that we know can be applied to all the different kinds of scenarios that people reach out to us about. And what a lot of people don't know, it's something that we didn't know for many years, is that a lot of our volunteers are actually between the ages of 18 and 24. So, and about 70% of our texters are under the age of 24. So more often than not, we're connecting somebody with someone who's close to them in age. Of course, we have volunteers of every age. We have texters of every age, but that's kind of where we found our sweet spot. And one more important thing to note is that all of our volunteers are overseen in real time by a mental health professional who's really going to help them kind of through the conversation with any questions that they have, or if there's an emergency going on, that professional is going to be the one who's going to handle that conversation more closely. But for the most part, what we're going to do is spend about 45 minutes connecting with you, trying to build some rapport, doing a risk assessment to make sure that you are safe. And if you're not, help you through creating a safety plan or something similar. Identify some goals of the conversation, what you really need from working with us, do some collaborative problem solving to move you towards that goal. And then we're going to wrap up. And then when the conversation closes, you'll get another automated message that basically says, thanks for reaching out. And it has a link to our survey where people can tell us how you think we did, how they feel now that the conversation is over, and any demographic information. So that's a little bit more about sort of, what people can expect when they reach out, and also what's automated and what's not.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's like, I've been sharing this resource for a really long time, and that was still a lot of things I didn't know. Like I did not know about the kind of like the ER waiting room aspect of it, and like using those words to determine really someone's immediate need. Like that's really cool, and cool to hear that you do that. I also love the phrase that you said that you guys kind of stand by is that if it's a crisis to you, it's a crisis to us. Because I do feel like that's a very common concern that people have is they're just like, well, I don't know what crisis means. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm curious kind of what your perspective on it is, but I'm curious if you see people honestly more often reaching out in some of those maybe mid-level crisis moments, maybe more so than those extreme crisis moments, because it feels to me, and maybe I'm wrong, it feels to me that it's a little easier to take a smaller but like brave step when you're at a moment where you're like, I know that I need help, but I don't know where to move on from here, as opposed to when you're in a really heavy crisis and you didn't already have like the safety plan in place. It can be kind of overwhelming to like know what to do next.
Yeah, I mean, we have people that reach out for both, honestly. I mean, it's a lot of the time, like 97% of the time, it's somebody who's not at imminent risk, which for us is somebody who it has a very serious plan for ending their lives. They have the means to complete that plan, and they have a very short time frame for doing so. So about
Mm-hmm.
97 to 98% of people are not in that scenario. And it could be anything else that's going on in their lives. So it is a lot of time people who are just like, I don't know where else to turn. I don't know who else to talk to. And I need to vent about what's going on. And then, of course, we do see people like the other 2 to 3% of people that do reach out are in a very imminent state, and we have to work with them. But that's really not the majority of the time that people reach out because, like you
Yeah.
said, Kayla, there's a lot of people who just want to talk about what's going on in their lives. And we're a safe place to do that because we can really help you think through what this is and think about the ways that you've gone through tough situations before. Because honestly, a lot of the things people text us about are just everyday bad days that unfortunately we're all going to have at some point in time. We're all going to go through some sort of relationship beginning or ending. We're all going to lose somebody that we love. We're all going to get stressed out at work or get into a fight with a friend. Like these are, unfortunately, that's the truth. And we can be
Right.
helpful in those situations to just say like, yeah, this is horrible, but how have you gotten through this in the past? Because this isn't your first bad day.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so nice to have it so accessible because, like, for some people, maybe they do have a friend that they like to talk to, or maybe they're really close to their parent and like they normally have that person as a, someone to bounce struggles off of. But people are people and like not always accessible. So it's just so nice to have like a foundation that's like no matter what, it doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. and no one is answering my calls, everyone's asleep right now. Like I have someone to reach out to. And that is one reason why I just really love this
Yeah.
resources for how accessible it is. I'm kind of curious, maybe turning it a little more personal. Here at TWLOHA, like we talk all the time about like what's our TWLOHA origin story, because obviously we do this work because we know this work and we love this work, and likely it has impacted us at some point in our lives in a positive way. So I'm kind of curious, like why crisis text line? Like why is your heart into this, and why are you here?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been at Crisis Text Line for 5 years, and I was really drawn to the organization because I've needed it in the past. I still need it today. I also know that like I'm somebody who struggled with anxiety and depression for as long as I can remember. And I was always afraid to use a service like Crisis Text Line myself because I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if I mentioned the
Mm-hmm.
word suicide, would the cops be at my door? How would my parents be able to monitor the conversations? Was it really going to be helpful? Because, a lot of people, especially in my teenage years, would say, oh, well, that's just teenage girl drama. And so I was worried that reaching out,
Right.
that's what I would get to. Oh, honey, you're too young to really be in an issue, or, oh, you'll get over it. It's no big deal. I was really afraid that like when I would reach out, honestly, that they would be patronizing like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't reach out for many, many years and could have really used the help. And so that's why I'm really at Crisis Text Line now, because I want to make sure that people know that it's a safe place to turn in all of the situations. We're not going to write off what's going on with you. We're not going to um, patronize you. We're not going to be judgmental in any way. We're really going to hear what's going on, no matter what's going on? No matter, even if there's definitely times I've texted him where I'm like, this is the silliest thing that's going on, and I can't believe I'm asking for help for this, but I need help. And so that's
Yeah.
really why I'm at Crisis Text Line. And not to really date myself, but TWLOHA was a big thing when I was in high school, and so you all are also a part of my origin story, and was part of why I was interested in mental health to begin with.
Yeah, it's really nice. I feel like ever since I've worked at TWLOHA, it's so cool to see the way that not only TWLOHA, but other organizations like Crisis Text Line that I have also have been here for me all of these years are like friends. Like it's like we really are all doing this work together, and
Yeah.
it's so nice to bring something different to the table and to be able to share each other for different reasons. And I just love it so much. And hope like I hope so dearly that we're able to give people the hope and help that they need in all of our different ways. That's me just getting really sappy for no reason. I wanted to pivot just a little bit and talk about something else that Crisis Text Line does outside of your texting services, and that is your research and your reports that you put out. You recently put out the 2023 United in Empathy report. And I'm kind of interested in hearing a little bit from you
Yes.
about that report. There was a lot of stress and anxiety. And I don't know that I'm surprised by that personally. That I feel like that checks out, but I'm curious how you feel about it.
Yeah. So every year we put out this report. We've been doing it for 5 years now. And what we do is we take a look at the data from last year's conversations. So the report this year is looking at 2023 conversations. And it's pulling together a couple of different sources for us. So obviously, when somebody texts in, we have like the time of day that they texted in. And we also have like an area code from their phone number to help us kind of understand about where in the country, hence United in Empathy, the United States. We also have at the end of the conversation, all of our volunteers check off the topics that were covered and list any coping mechanisms that the person mentioned. So that's some of where we get this data from, especially the issue topics. And then, like I mentioned, we send a link to our texters when the conversation's over, where they can tell us how they think we did, how they feel now the conversation's over, and any demographic information that they're willing to share. And about 20% of our texters fill that out for us. It's completely voluntary. They can skip any questions they don't want to answer. But that's about how many we find do fill it out. And that's what helps us understand things like how old our texters are, that nearly half of them identify as BIPOC and over half identify as LGBTQ, and all the other great things that help us understand what communities of our country are we reaching. So yes, you're totally
Mm-hmm.
right. In 2023, our top issues were anxiety and stress in our conversations. And I think that's really important to call out because, like we were saying, that's not really something that people might think of as a crisis because everybody has stress. Everybody
Yeah.
has a little bit of anxiety around change or around honestly the news cycle. I mean, there's so much going on in the world that is frightening, and it's hard to move past
Mm-hmm.
and have everyday lives when there is such violence going on. So it makes complete sense that anxiety and stress were the top issues. It's not the first year, and the other issues that closely followed that were relationships, which we define really broadly as anything from friendships to family relationships to romantic relationships to coworkers to classmates, just issues with people in your life, followed by depression and sadness. So, really feeling down. Of course, suicide does come up in a number of our conversations, and that's not always where somebody is imminently thinking about suicide. That could just be somebody having ideation, or
Right.
somebody who has a plan but doesn't want to proceed with it. And then isolation and loneliness. So still seeing that topic come up a lot. There's a loneliness epidemic, as they say these days, because we are
I
all still feeling
know.
somewhat
It makes me so
disconnected
sad.
from the pandemic. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to find your people. So that's still a topic that's coming up a lot in our conversations. So something that's really interesting that despite a lot of these like stressful events that are going on in the world, texters reached out first and foremost for issues that were closer to home. So concerns over personal relationships, finances, school. So more of those everyday things that unfortunately we all experience stress about. at some point in time.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that definitely checks out as to why I was like, I'm not super shocked with the anxiety and stress thing. I feel like anxiety and stress, like you said, people don't consider them to be like crises, and I think it's because there's in some ways they are like foundational feelings. Like if you're struggling with your relationships, if you're struggling with isolation, you are probably also feeling anxiety and stress over the fact that you're struggling with those things. And so it can be, I feel like it's so easy to
Yeah,
dismiss, like you said, because you're like, everyone is stressed. Look at the world. Like everyone's stressed out. But then it's like, that might be true, but also everyone should be able to reach out in their time. Like just because everyone's feeling this way doesn't make it any less like that you need to ask for help, you know? Like we all need to ask for help sometimes.
exactly. One of the things that we really noticed some trends in as well last year was that self harm and bullying surged for the third year in a row, and that's a trend that we've started noticing post the heart of the pandemic. We think that the trends could be related with anxiety. Based, for example, like if you're involved in bullying, whether as a victim or the perpetrator, that can really increase the risk of somebody for both self harm and anxiety. So that's a trend that we've really been keeping an eye on since the main isolation periods of the pandemic. But and it's something that's really disheartening.
Yeah, and I think with the isolation of the pandemic and just kind of the like digital landscape of community that we've created for ourselves, I'm I feel like we've almost horseshoed a little into um, back into cyberbullying in a way that feels a little like renewed, which is really concerning and really just unfortunate. But I think a lot of people were spending more time online than maybe they even were 5 years ago. More young people are spending
Yeah,
more time online than they were 5 years ago, and with that comes the learning curve of navigating the online spaces. And as you know, we know from the early days of social media, that was a hell of a learning curve. And because it's always changing, that also means the learning curve is always changing. Like the cyberbullying ads from 2006 are not going to hit the same. They're not going to even touch on the same things that we really
right.
need to be touching on today when it's just a whole different game, whole different ball game.
Yeah, yeah, it's completely different. And I mean, cyberbullying has been around now for a while, but just the reasons what makes it so difficult is that when you think about maybe in-person bullying at school, kids can leave that behind. They can, go home to a peaceful place, and that's not the case with cyberbullying. Is it's always there, it's always in your pocket, it's sending you notifications, and it can be really detrimental for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we're talking about needing people to reach out, all the reasons that people have reached out and need to reach out in the future. Before we wrap up, I kind of wanted to focus on two really important and like really different audiences. The first one being the person who has never reached out, is really hesitant about reaching out, doesn't know if it's for them, is just really maybe distrusting of mental health services to begin with. And then the other being someone who has reached out, but is maybe feeling like they need more. Like they're really glad that this resource exists, but now they're not sure what to do next. So starting with that first audience, what are like some common reasons that you hear why not, and what do you say to those?
Yeah. So, and there, all of these reasons are valid. It makes sense to not trust something that you're not familiar with. We have people who don't reach out because they're concerned that it's not really anonymous or it's not really confidential, and we take as many steps as we can to make sure that it will be. Um, we don't show up on people's phone bills, which is pretty nice. So if you're in a situation where somebody is looking at your phone bills to see
That's
who
cool.
you were texting, we're not going to show up on there. And you can always delete the conversation from your phone so that if somebody picks up your phone, they don't see it. We do have people who like to keep the conversations on their phone to read through in the future, but that's completely up to the situation that you're in. Some people might be concerned that, if you mention the word suicide, this is what I was concerned about. If you mention the word suicide, just, hey, I'm thinking about it, that's going to be enough to get emergency services involved. And that's not really the case for us. You would have to be pretty serious about your plan and not want to create a safety plan with us. And I would also say you don't have to say anything to us that you don't want to talk about. So when you text into crisis text line, you're completely in control of that conversation as far as what you want to discuss, what you want to bring up. What I like to tell people, especially if they're kind of concerned or hesitant about what's going to happen in this conversation, is to kind of give it a try for one of these more everyday bad days. So I've personally texted into services to kind of see how they work about just being stressed out about work. I mean, who's not stressed out about work? Even I love my job, but come on, like every day there's a bad day out there. And that's what I'll use to text into other services and kind of see how they work. And it'll be funny because I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm so stressed out of my job today. And I'm like, kind of making things up. And then as they're talking to me and they're kind of like, pulling out, well, what about it? Or, hey, it's brave of you to reach out for help about something like this. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is brave. I really did actually need this. Like I was testing this out for work, but now I'm like feeling better about it. So that's what I tell people is to
Yeah.
always test it out. You can also always try texting in next to a friend too, to kind of just not, so you're not feeling alone in that moment.
Yeah, I love those tips. I've never thought about that before, like doing it in a not moment of crisis and then being like, man, this was actually kind of nice. That's also really cool what you mentioned about not showing up on a phone bill. That is, I didn't know that, and I had not even thought about that. So that's a really thoughtful feature, and I love that. Okay, so let's pivot over to the complete opposite. Someone who's like, I go hard for crisis text line. I love crisis text line. I think they're so helpful, but they can only do so much. And what do I do now?
Yeah. So one of the things that we can do in our conversations, this comes up in about a third of our conversations, is we can share a link to a resource from our database. So because it's text, what's really nice is that we can filter through and send a couple of different kinds of resources. So we have over 800 resources in our database, 500 in English, 300 in Spanish. And it's everything from like in the moment exercises to help you calm down to articles or worksheets to help you through the kind of situation that you're in. When I've texted in before, I got a resource for a not like a D what is it like a knock how to not catastrophize a situation, and that was exactly what I
Mm-hmm.
needed in that moment. We also have things like findhelp.org or 2-in-1 where you can find local resources, and then the other would be like online or in-person support groups where you connect with people who are having similar issues or having similar experiences. And we're going to share this in about a third of our conversations. So we'll say something like, hey, I think we have a resource in our database that might be able to help you out. Would you mind if we send you a link? You'll get a link. You can open it when you wish. Maybe 3 a.m. is the right time. Maybe 3 p.m. the next day is the right time. And we want to make sure that it's not something that's going to kind of send you in the wrong route. All of our resources that we share are free and generally available throughout the day. So that's what we do for folks. I also know that TWLOHA has a really great resource, Find Help on their site, and that might be a place to go if you're looking for therapy in person or other types of resources, because ours tend to be less specific to a treatment model.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's a good way to kind of lead us into a closing. I always end with sharing our resources, including Crisis Text Line. But if you are looking for something past a crisis moment, we do have a Find Help tool. You can search by zip code. It has local and virtual options, support groups, counseling services. It also has services for things that you might not typically think are mental health. You can search for financial services, housing services. There are filters for things like that as well within the tool. So feel free to test that out, click around and see what you can find. You may need it in the future. So just have that bookmarked and saved for yourself. But the links for our Find Help tool, our website, Crisis Text Line's website, their texting information, all of that will be in the description below. And as always, if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out to TWLOHA or reach out to Crisis Text Line. We're here for you. We want you to know that you're not alone. We have these services because we really want you to use them and to know that it's okay to ask for help. So we'll be back really soon with another episode. Thanks for watching today, and see you next time.